And we've got 25 in the room, actually 26. So we're going to start the show, get this show on the road, as my dad used to say. And of course, it is Father's Day, so that's fitting that I should mention that. But a lot of people already in the room, so we're going to get going. And of course, a lot of good friendly names I recognize. Mark Miller checking in, talking about the mouse jiggler, which sounds dirty but isn't. Retired Butcher Boy, how you doing, my friend? And do it yourself, I guess. Jerry Brown and Spring and Harry Moyles in Spring Hill, Florida. Anthony Cook. Johnny Knoxville's checking in. I always like to see Johnny in the house. Johnny's an old-time friend of this show and this channel. Ron Klotzer checking in, saying, hey, Steve, mods, and chat from the middle of the Mojave Desert. MD Hofsty. Hi, Steve. Hey, MD, another name from the past. Ian the Ghost Rider, Jeeping Trucker. Hi, Steve, and all in the room. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers. And Johnny says he spaced last weekend. That explains why he wasn't here. No problem. Everybody needs a break. Scott Argyle checking from the Oregon coast. Emmanuel Guerra. Hey, Steve. Hello from California today. David Palomars. Hi from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Yes, it's a Commonwealth. Not necessarily a state, but they do get a star on the flag. Quick Reach Fours. Hey now from sunny Scottsdale. Hey now. I can't do it, but, you know. Aaron S. Hey, Steve and friends. Jonathan Irwin. Happy Father's Day. Eugene Carr. Stephanie Howe. Randall Munson from Alabama. Bob A. Bong. Hey, Steve and chat. Just want to let you know, not only is it Father's Day, it's also my 61st birthday. Wow. Congratulations, my friend. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Aesop W. Who. Hello from New Orleans, where it's apparently raining. Have not had rain here in southeastern Michigan for quite some time. Had about 5 or 6 minutes of just a downpour. I think it was Thursday. And it was sunny all day up to that point. And thunderstorms went past but did not hit me. And so my grass is screaming for water right about now. Utah Defender, you do great work. Keep it up. Duncan Campbell checking in, I believe, from Australia. Hey, Steve. Hey, Duncan. How are you, my friend? Mrs. Teresa. Hi, Steve, from Geneva, New York. Of course, Geneva is the location of the radio station where I did play disc jockey not so long ago. And I should do that again. I got to talk to some people that I know in radio. It's been a while since I got on there and spun the records, which, of course, they don't spin anymore. It's all digital. H. Moore from Gilbert, AZ. Ice Blue 112 from Illinois. Inside Out from Georgia. Gordon 861. Evening. Where are you? Someplace in Europe, maybe? Roberto Sola. Happy Father's Day, Steve. Analog Designer Jay. This is Jay checking in from San Clemente, California. Of course, San Clemente is known as the hometown, I believe, in the later stages of Richard Nixon's life. And I actually read a book as an autobiography written by one of his Secret Service guys and talked about how lonely that job was. Protecting Nixon when pretty much nobody cared about him anymore. MD Hofsty from the home of WFGR. I should be sleeping to get up for work in 7 hours. Hey, don't let me interfere with your work, your livelihood, my friend. Do what you got to do. Ali Al Abdul Razak. Hi from Kuwait. Checking in from perhaps the farthest away place so far. I have to do that on a map to figure out on a globe how far it is from here to Kuwait versus how far it is from here to Australia. And, of course, then it depends on where you are in Australia because I understand it's a big place. Quentin James. Hey, kids. Johnny Knoxville. Do you watch any of the 24 Hours of Lemons? Or do you mean Le Mans? Le Mans. I did not watch. No, I haven't watched that in a while. It's one of those things, if I'm flipping around and I see it, I'll watch it. But quite often, it's not on my radar. Because I stopped reading a lot of the stuff I used to read where I'd get caught up on that stuff. And I feel bad about it because I know there's some cool stuff to be seen. Hobie Jackson's checking in from Texas. Patrick Hill from Tally. ESO. Hey, from Wisconsin. That could be a Finnish name or it could just be an abbreviation of some sort. Dr. Rick. Hi, Steve. John D'Amato. Happy Father's Day. Thank you for checking. I appreciate that as well. My chat just jumped. I don't know why. I need to find some way to control the chat scroll. Maybe I need a scroll jiggler. Love your videos. Keep up the good work from Massachusetts. That's Deadly Gizmo. James Martin, KD4FUU. Greetings from Memphis, Tennessee. I've been there. Beautiful town. Love Memphis. Tiandre Mihan, hey, from Missouri, first time catching live. Well, first time I'm saying hello to you here, too, and I appreciate that. And, if we gained one person every weekend, we would pick up, I'd say approximately 50 or so people a year. And think how long it would be, not that long, I would think, till we have 1 million people here. Just being silly. Jay Blue, happy Father's Day. Hey, Steve, I hope you're having an awesome Sunday. David Art 1000. Andrew Lee checking in from Nome, Alaska, almost as if on cue. I got a letter from Andrew Lee. And I just realized, of course, Andrew Lee. Hello from Nome. Steve, here are some items from Nome, Alaska, included as an autographed book by Leon Bordway, as well as some buttons he made about the sled dog soldiers and others. Leon is an old timer who works at the Nome Visitor Center. He would get a kick out of you giving him a shout out during a live stream. Leon, this is your shout out. Thanks to your good friend Andrew Lee, who sent me a care package from Nome filled with buttons and keychains and all kinds of cool stuff. A whole bunch of pamphlets and flyers, which I'm assuming you can get from the Visitor Center. How to distinguish bull and cow caribou in the field. And you'll notice the shot there they have is of the back end. Apparently, that's how you tell. And a whole bunch of other stuff. But deep amongst all the things I got here was this book, The Tale of the Golden Billiken. And this is also included, and it's signed by Leon Bordway. So, Leon, my new friend in Nome, Alaska, thank you very much for writing that book. I'll check it out. And thank you, Andrew, for sending it to me. I greatly appreciate that. I got that at the P.O. Box a couple days ago, and I made a mental note. Put that right here and try to remember to talk about it. And I saw the mention of Nome, and I thought, well, what are the odds? So, David Hastings checking in from the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Alan Brown from Scappoose, Oregon. That's a nice name. Fred Hoyt, Stacks of Wax. Yeah, when you're playing those platters, spinning the hits, back in the old days. Yeah, it's not like that anymore. I'm just now finishing up the book, Radio Days, about the history of radio in Cleveland. And it's largely about WMMS, which was the powerhouse. It was internationally famous. It was such a big deal. And it's a fascinating book. I'm not that familiar with Cleveland in the sense that I never was there listening to the music, but it's just a big market. And the competition that went on between the different radio stations. It's a fascinating history. A viewer sent that in. And now I see a note here that Johnny points out, tipping isn't just a city in China. Tip the bartender. Thank you very much. I remember seeing that sign behind the bar at Todd's in Detroit, which played new wave music on Monday nights. And it's a real strange little place. People from Detroit from my era might remember it. Played really, really cool music, but it was in a kind of sketchy part of town, So you'd go down there to enjoy the music. And I knew the DJ, one of the DJs, Charles English, another guy I know is also a DJ in Detroit. Later on moved to Boston area, named Chris Ewan, who is a keyboard player for a band called Figures on a Beach. And they actually had a national record deal, got some airplay. They did a great version of You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet, which apparently Randy Bachman didn't like. But what are you going to do? But I liked it a lot. And I also know the guitar player is Rick Rolski, a good friend of mine also. But yeah, Fred Hoyt says the Buzzard, referencing WMMS there in Cleveland. And Josie Wales is from Cleveland. Check it out. Bubba Cleveland Ola from Auburn Hills, Michigan, drove by there just the other day. Drove by there yesterday, actually. And by the way, I mentioned last week I was going to see a show that night, right? So the live stream was 1:00. I said I'm going to see a show tonight. And I went and saw Australian Pink Floyd at the music hall in downtown Detroit. And my good friend Dave Fowler, who is the guitar player, one of the guitar players in the band, contacted me out of the blue and said, hey, I have this band. We tour internationally. We're going to be in Michigan. You want to come see us play? I said, absolutely. Backstage passes, hung up before the show, got a tour of the place, showed me his rig, showed me all the equipment on stage, saw the mixing console, met the band members, met a woman named Lorelei who sings backup when they're on stage, but she also toured with Pink Floyd, and she also toured with the Rolling Stones and got to talk to her at length. One of the nicest people, but she's got these stories. But hanging out with Mick Jagger and Keith Richards on the Steel Wheels tour a couple of years ago. But Dave Fowler's the great guy, and I did a review of that on my Vault channel. I talked about that experience of seeing that band live. I'd never seen them before, but they've gone in and they reproduce the albums on stage, note for note. 10 guys on stage, a support staff of 19. They got a whole fleet of trucks of their equipment, tour buses. And I was blown away at the high quality of what they're presenting. M. Kosachuk, where are you in Michigan? Southeast Michigan, think Detroit area, Oakland County-ish. Depends. My office is in Southfield. But he says, happy Father's Day from GR. Love your program. I assume you mean Grand Rapids. And if so, you're also in Michigan. Josie Wales says WMMS is 101 FM, actually 100.7. Yeah, a lot of radio stations did that back in the days, especially before digital tuners. And they would just say 101 as opposed to 100.7 or 100.9. And I remember, like, you know, when they called WABX for about 99 and a half. And of course, it's 99.5. But it's also true that in America, all the FM stations end with an odd number. So it'd be 100.1, never 100.0. And so every now and then in a movie, I'll see a situation where they want to name a radio station by frequency. They don't want to use a real one. So they'll go, 100.2, because there's no commercial radio stations on that frequency in America to get them some separation between the signals. David A. Palomares, what's your favorite call letters? Well, Detroit at one point in time had W4, WW, WW, and they also had WXYZ. Now, I think they still have XYZ as the television station, but the AM station changed WXYT. But I think XYZ and W4 were pretty cool sets of call letters. Then beyond that, it's up for grabs as to what you can spell with it. And there's all the magics and kisses and classics and all that stuff out there. It gets tired after a while. As God is my witness, I thought turkeys could fly. Mike Bundy, of course. Famous quote from WKRP. And turkeys can fly, just not very well. And if you drop them out of a helicopter over a crowd of people, it would not end well. It would not end well. So Michigan Farm Boy says your review of the show is great. Thank you. I actually sent a copy of that to Dave and to Lorelei and said, hey guys, I put up a video. I hope you don't mind. And they're like, no, thank you. Thank you very much. And then they reposted it on Facebook and stuff. It's kind of cool because I got a picture taken with David and Lorelei, and they posted that photograph on their page. And like, look, we met Steve Lehto. I met you guys. Oh boy. Jonas Bob York says, it's always confusing with Father's Day being different dates in different parts of the world. In Sweden and Finland, it's on the second Sunday of November. This coming one will be the first without my dad, who passed away in May. And I understand that. And that's one of those things. You know, there's some holidays that you don't have in other countries. Like we've got American Thanksgiving, right? And Father's Day, I was not quite sure how they do that in other countries, if they have Father's Day and Mother's Day and some of these other ones that sound like Hallmark holidays. You know, do you guys have Sweetest Day? But I feel for you. My father is still around. In fact, I had breakfast with him yesterday, and he's hanging in there. But my mother passed away a couple years ago, you know, and so she was 93 years old. 93 years old. And it's kind of hard to think about that. I mean, this is going to sound so stupid, but it's profound. When she passed away, obviously I had known her for quite some time. And the thought that she's gone is extremely difficult to process because she's been there your entire life, and not just your childhood, young adulthood, professional, the entire time. And so what happens is Mother's Day and Father's Day remind people of those who are gone. And of course, you know, nobody lives forever. And if you have pleasant thoughts, remember them. And that's what the day then becomes for you and me and so on. So absolutely. But thank you for checking in. I appreciate that, especially checking in from the Sweden, Finland area of Europe. Of course, I'm from Finnish descent, but we enjoy the Swedes. The Swedes and the Finns haven't always gotten along, and it's a joke that they don't get along at all. But trust me, they've got more important things to worry about with who's on the other side of Finland, and they're not that worried about Sweden in that sense. Mindbend says CKLW. Of course, that was the Big Eight out of Windsor. They were huge at the top of their game. Caesar Sueto, how would you like to see The Simpsons end of the show? You know something? Are they talking about that? If they are, it wouldn't surprise me. I kind of stopped watching them, and I hate to admit that, but they really hit their peak around like season 7. And around season 7, for a few years, they were killing it. And I stopped watching because it's gotten to be so self-referential and so almost like contrived that you know that the people who are writing it today grew up watching it. And that has impacted how they write it. And it's not the same. And I watched some classic episodes recently, Missionary Impossible. PBS's Bloodthirsty Pursuit is made possible through a grant from the Chubb Group. I mean, literally every line of that episode is funny. And I watch it now and I'm like, this isn't as funny. It's not as funny. By the way, Canadian Robot Lady has checked in. Good morning, Steve, and chat room. Hit the like button. Thank you, CRL. She's in the house. I appreciate it when she checks in. Of course, she's the voice at the beginning and end of my videos. And yesterday, I was going through my old videos. I was looking for something I lost. And I can't find this one video, and it's no longer on my channel. I think I took it down. I don't know why. I couldn't find it. So I was forced to actually go and pull up my archive and start at, I think I started in season 4. And I'd click on every single video until it started playing to see what the topic was. And it turns out that there were a whole bunch where the screen comes up and there's silence. And it messed with my head. And I'm like, oh. And then all of a sudden, on one episode, it's welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto. And it was a Canadian Robot Lady, the first episode with her. And then, of course, there's some episodes about her. I interviewed her in a video. But it was kind of funny because I know there's some people who started watching my channel only recently and who might not have gone back to any episodes from like season 4 or 5 where there were no intros or outros, as we call them. In Canada, they call them extras. And they're allowed to do that. But Brandon H. is the saying you can indict a ham sandwich true. What they're pointing out is that to get an indictment, all you need to do is get a grand jury, and it doesn't be unanimous, a majority of a grand jury to agree that a crime has been committed, most likely by this person, or more likely than not, or something. The standard is very low. And because the defendant isn't necessarily involved and doesn't put up a defense, I can bring in almost anything and start presenting evidence and go, I think, boom. And because the jury's only heard one side, the standard is so low, and then it doesn't have to be unanimous. Yeah, indictments are easy to get. And so a famous judge said that at one point to indicate that, a lot of people go, this person got arrested. They must have done something wrong. Well, a lot of people go, well, he was indicted. He must have done something really wrong. And no. People get wrongly arrested all the time. People get indicted all the time. Doesn't mean it, doesn't mean anything. It depends. It all depends. I've also seen where they've refused to indict people who are clearly guilty of stuff. So don't go there. By the way, somebody goes, John Ware, 344 watching, 27 thumbs up. I see 381 watching and 140 thumbs up. So it does matter as to whether you've refreshed it recently or not. Don't worry about the numbers, people. I do not care. Caesar Sueto says, your laugh reminds me a lot of Dr. Hibbert. Although his is almost always inappropriate, We found your liver. Okay. Mark Miller is Joe Satriani tune. Thinking of you. I post on Facebook every year on Mother's Day as a tribute. I'll have to check that out. Jonas Bob York says Mother's Day in Finland and Sweden is second Sunday in May. In Finland, it's even a flag day. Really? Wow, that's some serious stuff. That jumped on me again. Deadly Gizmo says, keep up the good work, buddy. And thank you, my friend, for calling that out. I appreciate that. I do like that. BW says, refreshing ups the counts of likes. Janice Ellery says, my father's been gone for 14 years. Still miss him. Mark Joliffe, hello from Clyde, Ohio. Clyde, Ohio. Believe it or not, there's a town called Clyde, Michigan. It's not far from Heartland. And it's just it now all there's there is a road that dead ends into a T stop, and the road curves around. And I think there's a house and possibly the remains of an old train station or something. And then the railroad tracks do cross the road there. And I think that back in the old days, there was more there, but there's a sign that says Clyde, and there is a Clyde Road also. So there must have been a guy named Clyde running around starting towns in the old days. William Nett, love your videos, Steve. Thank you. Rex Voucher says you're not really dead if people remember you. And of course, there's the joke from Seinfeld where George gets roped into that foundation to remember his dead fiance because Jerry told her parents that if they could only find a way to remember her, she wouldn't really be gone. And George thought he was out of it and he got dragged right back in. Mark Miller, Dad's tribute song is Blue on Black by Kenny Wayne Shepherd. Corey Thompson, after Conan O'Brien and such left the writing team, it's gone downhill. That's one of the funniest things of all is I remember hearing that Conan O'Brien was being groomed for a late night talk show. And I'm like, who is Conan O'Brien? Like, And somebody said, well, he's well known in Hollywood circles as a writer. He even wrote for The Simpsons. And of course, I wasn't always paying attention to the credits, and he did write some of the early stuff that I was talking about being in the meaty part of the curve of the good stuff. So Alan Brown Sr. says, hey, Steve, I've seen Aussie Floyd a couple of times in Portland. Awesome show. I'm jealous of you. Well, if you've seen them, you know what I saw. So I'm jealous that you got to see them more than once. I'm going to see them anytime they're in town, and I might travel to see them also. I had such a blast. It was, I thought it was going to be good because I'd read some reviews and stuff, but I was blown away. And you guys know I see a lot of shows. And so for me to have that reaction at a show like that, these guys really did nail it. They really did. And it was fun because getting to know the guys and seeing the equipment before the show started really helped me understand what I was seeing. And, I was talking about guitar techs changing guitars, coming out with a new guitar at the beginning of the song. There were a couple of times where I saw Dave change guitars mid-song. It's not like he broke a string. He actually changed guitars because the second part of the song used a different sounding guitar. I mean, the attention to detail was absolutely amazing. ESO, have you ever heard of Dave Calway, 95.5 WIFC, or any other Wisconsin radio guys? No, I don't know anybody in Wisconsin radio. For a little while, there was a radio station up near Ironwood. Of course, that's the Michigan side. And then Hurley is the Wisconsin side. There's a radio station up in that area. I used to do interviews on quite often, but that, of course, was small market radio. That was not big powerhouse radio. That was a station where they would put a guy on for half an hour to talk about the Italian Hall disaster on like a weekday morning. Right in the middle of drive time. Here's Steve Lehto. Let's talk about the Italian Hall disaster. MD Hofsty says Weed is an AM gospel station in North Carolina, has got to be the best call sign, but also oddest music type for that call sign. I wonder if they got that on purpose and think like somehow that like they're spreading the seeds of the gospel or something. I don't know. Michael Wowtrate says, don't mind me. I'm playing The Sims 4 while I'm listening. Have a great day. Thank you. And I thank you for checking in. I just like to see people checking where they're from. I just, some of the names I recognize, but not all of them. Tim Nossum, Steve, do you both of your cars run on 93 octane? Notice how I treated the N as if it was silent. Yes, the Viper and the Cobra both run on premium. And I've never even accidentally put the cheap stuff in there. But for how little I drive them, it's not as that's going to break the bank. So JB Weld, why isn't Michigan's bottle deposit raised with inflation? Because it was already way too high. Duncan Campbell says that Conan wrote the Monorail song. Did he really? Monorail? I think Ogdenville's got a monorail. Mark Miller still hoping Distant Dream will come tour the U.S. There's a bunch of bands that have, as far as I know, never toured in America, and it kills me. And so Duncan and my other Australian friends, please tell me that you know who James Rain is of the band Australian Crawl. Band broke up. He put out some solo music. It's wonderful. And as far as I can tell, he plays tiny little clubs in Australia now because it's been so long since he had a big hit. So Bob Blah Blah is checking in from Alston, not far from Nisula. I was talking to somebody who is familiar with the Upper Peninsula of Michigan yesterday. And they go, "Where did you spend your summers?" And I said, "Well, running around the woods out near Alston, blank look. Near Nisula, blank look. West of Baraga." And they go, "Oh, I've heard of that." Of course you heard of that. You drive through it when you're coming around the bay, but Tomas checking in from Temple, Texas. Tim Nosma says that the autocorrect inserted that improper N. No, technically my name is Steven. It is, but it's Steven with a V. And so I just dropped the N so nobody would ever go, "How do you spell that? Steve? Steve? How else?" And I've also thought it's kind of odd that people with a PH spell it with a V. How do you do that? You're allowed to shorten your name and change the letters? But you can. It's acceptable. It's like getting Bob from Robert, right? Or WM from William. Freeman Forbes from Columbus, Ohio. Happy Father's Day, Steve. Thank you for checking in. And of course, Columbus, Ohio is the home of a university with a football team. And normally Columbus, Ohio would be a place of I'd be thinking about in those terms. But I tell people, I say, look, 51 weeks out of the year, I'm fine. I've even worn Ohio State shirts on camera. So Pat Z from Southern Texas, hi. Reinhard Man checking in from where I live. That's good. Doug Wallace, hello, Stephen, my fellow Lehtoites from Arkansas. I'm not sure what else you could be besides a Lehtoite. Mindbend, what is your daily driver? I have two Ford Explorers, one old one, it's an 02, and a newer one, which is a 2019. And I alternate them depending on where I'm going. And the 02 runs like a Swiss watch. It still runs perfectly, nothing but oil changes and basic maintenance. I love that vehicle, but it's not as modern. But I mean, it's got AC, so I don't care. But if I'm going on a longer trip, want to be more comfortable, heading downtown, something like that, I bring the newer Explorer. But it's one of those two. Taco Cat, which of course is Taco Cat when said backwards. What is Marshall, Michigan known for? A couple things. Marshall, Michigan is not far from Colon, Michigan. And it's known for beautiful, beautiful homes, among other things. So that's kind of down in this area of Michigan. Not quite as far west over as Eau Claire. I was talking to somebody yesterday, and they go, "You lived in Eau Claire?" And I go, "Yeah." Why? Hey, this is America. You can live anywhere you want, and I enjoyed it. So that I can tell you. Oh, boy. Corey Thompson's watching from the Minnesota side of where North Dakota, Minnesota, and is it Manitoba meet? My my geography is not as good when I'm having stuff thrown at me from left field. And the station jumped again. Harry Moyles, my favorite radio station was WKNR, Keener 13. An AM station trying really hard to do battle with CKLW back in the day. Doing a pretty good job of it, by the way. I follow a couple of different things on Facebook that post charts from back in the day, the top 20 songs, top 40 songs, whatever it is. And it might be the Billboard top 10, or I've seen the Keener 13 lists also. And I love seeing the ones that are local like that, because quite often they'll purposely have songs in there that would make them sound different than CKLW or some other top 40 station. So Brent Desjarnet from Richmond, Virginia. Hey, thank you for checking in. Deadly Gizmo says, I love that saying, break the bank. That is an odd one until you think about it. But of course, to go broke financially is different than breaking something. But Kurt Singer, Diesel and Dust, lawyers band from Australia. I've not heard of them, but I've heard of Diesels and Dust. Reminds me of Midnight Oil. Don't they have something similar to that in one of the titles of one of their CDs or something? I remember I was living in California listening to KROQ Los Angeles when Blue Sky Mine came out. Oh my gosh. They played it to death and I loved it. And I remember I moved back to Michigan and I bought it because I'm like, they're not playing it on the radio here. So, Yeah, Mrs. Hayes goes, why do you get dick from Richard? And you know something? That's one that didn't age well, as they say. I've got a brother named Richard, and I had a friend named Richard who, if you asked him, can I call you Dick? He'd go, can I call you a-hole? But he would say the word. And they'd be like, what? And he goes, no, I don't want you calling me that. Like it's a nickname. And so someone walks up and introduces themselves. And I've met usually older fellows who say, I'm Dick. And yeah, fine, that's fine. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. But to assume you can immediately start calling somebody by a nickname like that, you know, it's a bit much. So Juan Peralta checking from Port St. Lucie, Florida. IB One Cool Cat, Port Washington, Ohio. Jonas, Bob York, probably Jonas. It's easier if you can prepare. My father was 72 and got very ill, rushed to the hospital where he passed, but the music we listened to is still there, such as the Eurythmics, Leonard Cohen, and CCR. That is a great group, an eclectic mix, as I like to say. Leonard Cohen, everyone knows him for Hallelujah, but not his version, but other people's versions, but his version's good too. But he's got a song called Everybody Knows that was covered by Concrete Blonde, and that's a great song. Likewise, Democracy is coming to the USA. It was played a lot on CIMX back in the day, and he's got some great stuff. He's one of these guys, like Bob Dylan, where you can read his lyrics, and you read one sentence, and you're like, this is better than anything written being played on the radio today. This one sentence. Oh, wait, the next sentence is even better. Oh, Johnny C. Fradley asked Aussie Floyd how many times the tour bus had to go back to the dealer for problems. No, because they had Prevos. They had expensive tour buses. They had the kind that don't have problems. When you spend that much money, they don't. Steve says, I hate being called Steven instead of Steven. Okay. Kurt says, my name is not Steven with a V. Many people can say that, and it's true. That metal guy, any update on the Marion, Kansas newspaper story? I don't think so. At least not that I've heard. If it crosses my desk and I see it, I'll do an update. That's the crazy one where the police decided to shut down a newspaper for reporting the truth, which seems like it might be a violation of one of those pesky little amendments, probably near the top of the list, probably at the top. Nick Stero, happy Father's Day to the dads out there. Thank you very much. I'm not sure what SEK stands for. Is that like Swedish kroners or something? Or euros? I don't know. Somebody will convert it for me, so that would be fine. Silver Mountain checking from West Bend, Wisconsin. Miss Poovy says Lehtoan or Lehto-ian. At least not Lehto Gander. Blah, blah, blah. Lehtoian or heaven forbid a Lehtoer. Heaven forbid. Lehtopites. Lehtolings. MB, yes, Manitoba. Woo! Glad I got that right. And she would know that's a Canadian robot lady. I kept thinking, like, is it possibly like, you know, I don't know, Mount Blanc or something? Oh. Charizard743 says, hey, Steve, I love your videos and think you have a great understanding on the meaning of justice. I recently saw Brit Floyd at Red Rocks. It was great. Keep up the great work. Love from a 24-year-old in Colorado. Thank you for checking in, my friend. I've never been to Red Rocks. My understanding is, and I could be slightly wrong on this, but I hope I'm not, that Aussie Pink Floyd or the Aussie Floyd Show started out in Australia in 1988. And they started touring the world and became very popular. And along the way, some members left and some other people joined. And Dave Fowler joined 14 years ago, but he was not there in 1988. And I believe that the other group, Brit Floyd, was a spinoff from Aussie Floyd. And so I think it's a lot of the same people in both camps. And my understanding is they both do a great job. I've never seen Brit Floyd. I've seen them on YouTube. But for those who have not checked out my previous videos, please, when you're done here, or minimize this screen and pull up YouTube on another tab and go see Aussie Pink Floyd's version of either Time or Wish You Were Here. And you can watch it. It'll blow you away, but you listen to it and it sounds note for note. And I, the other day, as an experiment, pulled up one song by Aussie Pink Floyd and one song by Pink Floyd, studio version. And I played 1 minute, 1 minute, 1 minute, 1 minute. And I realized I could not tell the difference. Couldn't do it on the song I'd picked. So it was amazing. Johnny Z. Bradley says Lebanon here, Missouri. Um, Bald Thanos is a $100 bill on the shelf, always moves to different places every day. Yeah, but there's also other stuff that moves around back there too. It is simply a prop. I get emails, confused emails about once a month, where somebody goes, "Hey, Steve, I found the $100 bill. Can I have it?" And I said, "Well, if you got to keep everything you found on my set, I wouldn't have a set left." Okay. I go, people find it every day. It's not hidden. It's moved. There's a difference. But I also got to mention, I did a story a couple days ago about a woman who showed up to teach her second graders drunk, and she got arrested. And then the prosecutor said, this is kind of embarrassing, but there's technically no law against teaching while drunk. So they let her go. And I did a story about it, and I said, that's a crying shame. There ought to be a law against teaching while drunk. And I had someone write to me and go, Steve, you need to get a clue. You don't understand what teachers are going through. And the implication is, number one, I don't know what teachers go through, because why would I? My mom was a teacher. My dad is a teacher. My grandmother's a teacher. My grandfather's a teacher. And I've been a teacher. And I've got friends who are teachers right now. And I need to get a clue about how they're treated, because it's reasonable for a teacher to show up drunk. And when I put that video up, I never imagined that somebody would defend that and say, it's understandable that teachers drink on the job. They should be allowed to. There should not be a law against it. I think she was serious, but I don't know for a fact. Drusky or Drewski, do you get another YouTube plaque for hitting 500,000 subscribers? No. It's, if you graft it, you get one for 100,000, and you get one for 1 million. And then I think you get one for 5 million. It's crazy. They should. It took me longer to get to 500 from 100 than from 0 to 100, but that's just how they do it. Chuck Whitehead says, could an officer give you a ticket for not having control of your car if you have a Tesla in self-driving mode? If it wasn't under control. But if the app was controlling it, you'd make the argument, say the app is controlling it. The same way that my hand would be controlling the wheel. Although don't they tell you to keep your hands near the wheel? I don't know. Don't have a Tesla. Jonas says that Midnight Oil is or was an Australian band. Yes, that's why I was mentioning them earlier when somebody said there's an Australian band named Diesel and Dust. So hang on. It jumped on me again. Oh boy, why does it always do that to me? Hang on. Why is Michigan shaped like a hand? That's where God slapped the earth to begin its spinning. Yuck, yuck. God's left-handed. That would make sense. Oh my, I think we're onto something here. Ed G checking in from the Poconos. Happy Father's Day. Happy Father's Day. Likewise from New Baltimore, Michigan, Jimmy Bird. Mike Lackner, what do you listen to in the Viper? The throaty rumble of the side pipes. No, it doesn't have side pipes. No, I actually, it has a CD player, but I actually got one of those things you plug in the cigarette lighter that allows you to play your phone through your stereo. And I listen to playlists of my own music. If I'm alone. If I'm not alone, I talk to the person who's in the car with me. Bald Thanos says, just never meet Dick Van Dyke. Yeah, there's all kinds of jokes there. I don't think we need to go there, do we? Scott Argyle says, Midnight Oil put on a great show. I forgot the lead singer's name, but the big tall guy. I've seen them do live shows, not personally, but on TV and on videos. And that guy is energetic. He is energetic. So, ESO says you get Tim from Timothy, you must get Jim from Jimothy. Alan Brown says 92.3 KGON, Portland's classic rock. I've listened to them for 50 years since I was a teenager. And you got to remember, there are rock and roll stations in a lot of towns like WRIF in Detroit, signed on in the 70s, and pretty much has not changed format since. Some of the people have come and gone, but some people have stuck around for decades. I'm talking about people on the air. So it is pretty impressive when a radio station can hang on that long and remain relevant. Nanak OFCCLO. Hi, Steve. Greetings from Carlton, Michigan. Aaron Freeman says Bill is short for WM period. Tim Nossman, I love a good punk new wave cover song. You know what's funny is there are all kinds of covers, and we could talk about this for days, so we won't. But like, for instance, there's the song The Promise by When in Rome. We've all heard the song The Promise. Big MTV hit, The Promise. There's a country singer named Sturgill Simpson who covered it. And someone said, Steve, you got to hear, and this is years ago, you got to hear this cover of The Promise by Sturgill Simpson. And I'm going, oh, I've heard so many bad covers where country musicians take a song and just, no, the guy knocked it out of the park. I was blown away. I'm like, oh my, it's one of my favorite renditions of any song ever. It's that good. And so occasionally that happens where somebody's like, oh my. And the song by Bob Dylan, I Want You. Okay. His version is kind of hard to listen to. But Allie Campbell from UB40 does a reggae version of it that's amazing. And for Allie Campbell or whoever arranged it to hear Bob Dylan sing that song and go, oh, wait a second, that would make a good reggae song. That's why there's musical geniuses out there, and I'm in awe of them because I have no idea how they do that. So, Jerry Brown says, why are some people named John nicknamed Jack? And I've also known people named Jack who were named Jack on their birth certificates. And that's, there's a bunch of those. I think it was how popular the names like William, James, Robert, John, some of these names that were common in my era, they have nicknames for them so that when there was 7 of them in one class, they could kind of sort them out. I remember sitting in a classroom in elementary school and there's 3 Steves in that room. And I was one of them. And I think in my high school graduating class, smaller class, we had 3 Steves in that also. And so, you get that really common name like that. So Robert Johnson, speaking of Bob Jack, thanks, Steve. Keep up the good work. Greatly appreciated. Keeping it real. Checking in from Mansfield, Ohio. Remember CKLW, WMMS, home of the Buzzard. Lots of rock concerts that WMMS sponsored. That's one of the things that the author of the book I'm reading right now says that really helped MMS cement their position at the top of the heap in that town was they sponsored a lot of big shows, especially Bruce Springsteen, who had a special relationship with the station. But they kind of had a misfire because they sponsored the Victory Tour by the Jacksons, and it didn't sell out. But, hey, you can't win them all. Michigan Farm Boy says Marshall is known for Schuler's Restaurant, a former proposed location for the state capitol. A lot of historic homes and a nice fountain in the middle of town, and also a Ford battery plant. Yeah, I know about Schuler's. I've never eaten there. Proposed location for the state capitol, there's a whole bunch of those. But the historic homes are what most people that I know of know it for, as well as the restaurants, of course. So, Jay Waleed Cadillac says, Greg and Victoria say hey from Bangor, Maine. Thank you for checking in. Weston checking in from Northern California. Mike Lackner says, my name is Mike, not Michael. You may be surprised how many argue with me about my name or call me a liar. If you talk about it on the internet, people who don't know you will call you a liar for saying things that are demonstrably true. Today is Sunday. You liar! You liar! But arguing with somebody as to what their own name is. Oh boy. Monk Standing Last has done the last Monk Standing has done the conversion for me. 1 Swedish krona is 0.94 US. So I'm guessing it's pushing 10 cents. Stephen Cook, hi Steve, have a good day. My first grandfather's day at 65. There you go. That's interesting. I've got classmates of mine who are now grandparents. The funny part is I had some of them who were grandparents a few years ago. I mean, mathematically, you could do it at like say 36 if everything worked out just the mathematical way. But yeah, so and G Vogt, of course, happy Father's Day to all the fathers who are no longer with us. We talked earlier about remembering those who are gone. And I also posted a video in the vault yesterday, Friday, where I talked about I had time to spend before I got to the show to see Aussie Pink Floyd. And I went down to the Elmwood Cemetery in Detroit and visited Douglas Houghton's grave. And it's been a couple years since I got out there and spent some time out there, and it was amazing. But I always like visiting that cemetery in particular because so many famous people are there. And I always feel bad about cemeteries because a lot of times I visit cemeteries, I'm the only person there, and it's sad because someone passes away and they're in the cemetery, and you're at the funeral and you leave. How long before you come back? And so it's always, to me, I walk around and I look at some of the headstones of people I don't know, and I wonder, am I the first person to look at and read this stone and think about this in some time? And quite often it could be, but I'm also very respectful, and I try to read the stuff under the stones if there's any extra information about a person. Um, I'm not going to get this exactly right, but not far from the town of Nisila in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan is the Laird Township Cemetery, and it's down a dirt road south of the little road there, about a mile. Sandy dirt road. There's one or two homes back there, and there's a cemetery kind of out in the middle of nowhere. And my mother's cousin, I believe it is buried there. And my brothers and I were looking for his grave. We were up there. We had some time to spend. So we were looking for we couldn't find my mom's cousin's grave because we had stories about him growing when we were growing up and visiting him, and he lived nearby. And we walk around this one corner, and there's a grave there, a fairly modern marker, and it's got all this elaborate etching on it, and it's fairly recent. I think the guy passed away in the 1990s or possibly 2000s, and it has a picture of a rocket on it. And it gives the guy's name, and he's a local who worked for NASA, the space agency. And he's buried in the cemetery down a dirt road out in the middle of nowhere. And I remember photographing the grave and coming back and looking it up later on the internet and reading about the guy. And it was just so amazing. Now, I find a lot of military markers that are historical, Civil War veterans, World War I, World War II, Korean War, Vietnam War. You find these military markers and you can read them and figure out like where somebody served, if they died in combat or not, that kind of thing. And there's also sometimes other markers. There's a really, really old cemetery in Birmingham, Michigan, at the north end of Quarton Lake. And in that cemetery is a family plot with two sons who died during the Civil War. And you know that because the Civil War markers there, and they both died in the 1860s during the time frame of the war. And you go, wow, what a tragedy that the family had two sons go off to war who passed away in the war. But next to it is an obelisk, a little tower that's got carving on it. And one of the sons died at Gettysburg, and it gives the date. And the other one died in Andersonville, which is a Confederate prisoner of war camp. And he died taken prisoner, and he died in the camp. And to people who study the war, Gettysburg, of course, is huge, and Andersonville is notorious. And so the fact that this family, their two kids went off to war and didn't come back alive, but they were at those two places. And I remember the first time I was walking through the cemetery and I'm starting to put the story together, the sons who died there. And I thought, wow, think about the sadness there. And then I read the carvings, the inscriptions on the obelisk, and I'm like, this is unbelievable. And so I've actually taken people out there and shown them that. And they're like, oh my gosh, And by the way, there's other famous people. Elmore Leonard, the novelist, is buried in that cemetery. And so are some of the people who founded like the Detroit News, and some other very, very well-known people. Again, names that are on local roads are on gravestones at that cemetery. So if you're ever in Birmingham, Michigan, find Quarton Lake, and then go up the north end and you'll see the cemetery. Bob Bondi, I saw Rick Beato do a What Makes This Song Great for the first time in quite a while, Walking on the Moon. I love Rick Beato. He'll take some song you've heard a million times. You've heard it a million times because it's a big song, but he'll break it down as a musician and a record producer because he produces music also. And he'll point out, like, let's strip the vocals out. Let's listen to the guitar part. Okay. Now, notice in the second verse where this instrument comes in right here. And he's explaining it musically, but in a way that non-musicians can understand. And he's done a couple songs like Just Like Heaven by The Cure. I've heard that song so many times that I was convinced I knew it. And I saw that he did a What Makes This Song Great about it. And go, okay, Rick, show me something. Like 2 minutes in, I'm going, I didn't know this song. I'd heard it a million times, but I didn't know it. So, Henry Nissanen says, checking in from Helsinki, going to be moving to Detroit area in about a year. Got to wait 12 to 18 months for the grinding gear of immigration bureaucracy to run its course. Send me a note when you get here. I'll introduce you to my other friends who are Finns who came to America. In fact, a very good friend of mine is Markku. And he came to America and he sent a note to the Finnish American Heritage Center in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan and said, hey, I just moved here from Finland. I'm going to school in southeastern Michigan. Are there any Finns down here who might be able to like just help me out if I need something? And they said, yeah, call Steve Lehto. So he sent me a note and we've been corresponding and hanging out ever since. I've hung out with him at the Woodward Dream Cruise a couple times. He's got a classic car and we correspond quite a bit. And he's one of my Finnish friends, although I think he's a U.S. citizen now. But and he works for a car company, and he's a great guy. So if you're moving here, Henry, let me know, and I'll do what I can to help you. So Patrick Hill says, find Leonid and Friends doing September. But Earth, Wind, and Fire, of course, is perfection. I've had several people suggest Leonid and Friends to me. I'm aware of them, and they're a group of guys who do songs of that genre. Earth, Wind, and Fire, a lot of Chicago, and they do a great job of it. And they're the kind of group where you look at them and go like, I'm glad YouTube exists because I don't know if I've heard about them otherwise. Big D's Homestead says this man should be on SCOTUS. Who's he talking about? He's by far the greatest lawyer I've seen on here, and that's saying a lot because there's really a few really good ones. Hey, I know Steve Lehto for president. People say, Steve, would you like to be a judge? I always say no. Then they say, okay, would you like to be like an appellate judge? Possibly. Would you be on SCOTUS? Let's suppose, magic wand, Steve, you get to be a Supreme Court justice. That I would do, because that ain't heavy lifting. You got a staff working for you. All you got to do is make these big policy decisions. Is this good or not? President, I'm not sure. Do I have to run? Like, is there a whole election campaign cycle? I can't imagine that. Having attack ads run against me. I don't think I'd want to put up with that. Tim Nossum, Aussie Pink Floyd's Run Like Hell is spot on, especially the backup vocals. I agree. They closed their second set with that song, and they do a great job of it. It's really, really good. It's really good. Carl's Corner, if you can teach while being stupid, what's the difference about teaching while being drunk? Sadly, drunk people can be a danger to themselves and others. And stupid people, I mean, if you hired them, they've got to have some level of something. But the fact is, you hired them sober and they go into the classroom drunk, they might make bad judgments while in there. And so we don't want to go there. JW was a California teacher committing public intoxication. I don't know what the standards are in California, and I also don't know how the statute reads, because that's the real question. Because they might say that the classroom qualifies as public. It might not. I don't know. But I do believe there were some issues about when they took the blood alcohol readings versus when the person drove into the parking lot. Because I think they said that they had her on video getting out of her car and coming into the building. And if they breathalyzed her right then, they could obviously say you're drunk driving. That's bad. But by breathalyzing her so much later in the day, apparently, she could make the argument, no, I drove here sober and I got drunk in the classroom, which to me is even crazier. But what are you going to do? Taco Cat, consider doing a book on random, interesting grave markers or headstones. I don't know if I know enough of them, and they'd probably be local because all the ones I know are in Michigan. My favorite one that I've found, and I've told people about this, it's in West Bloomfield, Michigan. It's a grave marker. By the way, it's in the same cemetery that Norm Cash is buried in. Norm Cash, the longtime first baseman for the Detroit Tigers. I discovered that too while wandering through a cemetery. And there's a grave marker for a guy who was an officer during the Toledo War in the Michigan militia. And he was a veteran of the Toledo War. And I contacted somebody in some administration, someplace who puts out the historical markers for veterans. And I said, hey, are you aware of any markers for Toledo War veterans? They said, no. And I said, well, I know of one. And I described it to them. And they said, oh, okay, we know of one. So, oh. Ed G, speaking of cemeteries, what happens when they have sold all the land? Who maintains it? Is it true after so many years they can resell plots? Plots that have people already buried in them? I think most states have got laws designed to protect cemeteries, and they have to be maintained with some sort of trust. But the problem, of course, is a cemetery out in the middle of nowhere that kind of gets semi-abandoned, and then they're trying to find who's in charge of it. So I don't know much about it. I actually knew an attorney whose family had some connections to cemeteries. And he said, from a legal standpoint, if you're doing it right, it's actually quite difficult and expensive. So Darth Vader says Steve moved to Chicago with a question mark. Been to Chicago, but have not moved there. Joe Cram doing a van life tour this fall. Any place you'd recommend of coming in from Wisconsin over the top of Lake Michigan, down through Mackinac on my way through Ohio? Absolutely. There's a place called Kitchitikipi. Kitchitikipi, spelled just like it sounds. Kitch. Kitchitikipi. Google it. It's a natural spring. It's one of those wonders of nature. It'll blow your mind. There's a state park. It's over west of Escanaba away. But if you're coming in from that way, it's right along your path. And you go out on a pontoon, or not a pond, like a raft that gets pulled back and forth across this pond on ropes. And 20 or 30 people can get on this thing at one time. And because the water's coming up from underground, it's crystal clear. And it's, I don't know how deep it is, 40, 50 feet deep. You can see straight to the bottom. And there's big fish just gliding around down there. And many of the fish were planted there because it is attached to a lake. But there's something about these big fish being in there. It keeps other fish out. But I talked to a guy, he goes, they take these big fish and retire them from the DNR when they are using fish for some purpose. And they release them here. And it's you've seen waterfalls. You've seen sand dunes. You've seen stone structures. This is the only place like this that I know of in Michigan that is like this. It's really cool. And the cost of admission is basically what it costs to get into a state park. So get in, check it out. It's unbelievable. And I remember taking pictures with my camera, looking straight down, and you look at it and you show it something, they go, so what? It's a picture of a fish. Yeah, that fish is 20 feet beneath me in crystal clear water. It's crazy. It's crazy. So Kitchitikipi is the one thing. Escanaba is kind of neat. The whole drive along US 2 over the north end of Lake Michigan is pretty cool. If you could run up to the top side of the UP and see pictured rocks, I'd recommend that. Take the road that goes along the pictured rocks over to Grand Marais, beautiful area, and then come back down, and you'll still have a chance to see some of US 2, and then cross the Mackinac Bridge. Mackinac Bridge is one of the wonderful things in Michigan. 5-mile suspension bridge connecting the two peninsulas. So there you go. Sassy Letty once says, I'd vote for Steve. Only once. Oh. Silver Mountain planning a trip to the eastern UP with the kids, probably in July, going to an iron mine in Iron Mountain. Yeah, that's right there along the main road there. And the Shipwreck Museum in Whitefish Point, I highly recommend that also. Any other recommendations? If you're in that area, you've got to see Tequamanon Falls. There's the upper and the lower. You can drive from one to the other. You can hike between them, but it's a pretty lengthy hike. And if the bugs are out, it'll kill you. You'll wish. But the Tequamanon Falls, absolutely. Whitefish Bay, Whitefish Point, and the museum, absolutely. And if you can get over to the Sioux Locks, I'd recommend that also. The Sioux Locks are cool. You can see these gigantic boats the size the Edmund Fitzgerald go through. And you can watch the process as they come in, they get raised up, and they get released. Or they come in, they get dropped, and they get released. It's really cool to watch. And they now have an observation deck. So you can go up on the observation deck. And some parts of the summer, they're just boats going through like it's Grand Central. And if you get bored, pull up a website called Boat Nerd, BOATNERD, boatnerd.com. And you can see which boats are coming, which boats are going, where they're, even out a few miles. It'll show all the boats in the area. It's very, very cool. Cold Lake Alta, could the drunk teacher not be charged with endangering children? Well, that's the problem. They said, but what did she do that endangered them? And they were thinking that the mere fact that she was drunk wasn't enough. So Steve says, instead of smoking in the boys' room, that teacher's drinking in the girls' room. Brownsville Station, out of Michigan, by the way, is the one who did the song Smoking in the Boys' Room. But I don't know there's a parallel to that with drinking in the girls' room. So there you go. Ian the Ghost Rider Jeeping Trucker says, I'll look into the interesting graveyard book idea for myself. There you go. There you go. Lewis Browning says the corporation would hate that Professor Lehto would be either president or attorney general. I'll tell you right now, if I was a judge, like a circuit court judge, and someone brought a lemon law case in front of me, I can picture somebody going, we can't have it in front of this guy because number one, he knows the law so well, which shouldn't disqualify me, but we think he's probably going to rule for the consumer. So Carl Jones, I was on that raft in April in Kitchita-Kippy. Took me about a month to say that right. Kitchita-Kippy. Dan Nolan, James Dean Day is held every year. That's what started it. Dillinger's grave was a cool story and hard to find. Where's Dillinger buried? I missed it at prior discussion. Sorry about that. MHOA says, I've seen it in some spring-fed lakes in Minnesota. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. There probably are full lakes like this. But the interesting thing is that it's a natural bowl, okay? And so you go a foot from shore, and it's so deep, and the bottom is apparently some kind of volcanic rock, and so it's very, very little on the bottom, and nothing stirs it up. And it actually messes with your head when you look down and you realize, like, oh, there's water there because it's so crystal clear. And watching those fish just glide around is so cool. Lewis Browning, is it true they found the Edmund Fitzgerald? Oh, they found it shortly after it sank. It wasn't that long after it sank. They managed to get down to it and dive on it. And they've also sent like submersibles down. It's in extremely deep water. And it's also technically in Canadian water. But they've also reached some deals where the area is protected so that, recreational people can't just go out and mess around out there. So, yeah, the Edmund Fitzgerald, they found that a long time ago. And there was a boat, a ship on the Great Lakes just a week or so ago that there were news reports all over the place about how this boat had hit something underwater and it was listing 15 degrees. So they fired up the bilge pumps and they're pumping to get it back upright, and they managed to do it. And so then they spun it around and took it back into port, and they said, we've got to examine the gash to see what we hit. And they looked down at it, and they realized it hadn't hit anything. It was just a stress crack or a fatigue break. And so boats that big are sailed so often that we think of them as like these indestructible things. But you understand an iron ore boat that is several football fields long, if you were standing at one end looking down inside of it while it's out on the lake, you can actually see it flexing, and it's iron. And the fact that it does that indicates that, yeah, there's some flexibility. They want it to do this, so it won't be brittle. But likewise, if you flex it enough, it breaks. So that's a really strange thing. I'm not sure how they can figure out what's the life expectancy of something like that, but it's concerning. Fred Hoyt, how can they arrest you for sleeping in your car drunk but not with school kids? Like I said, I don't write the laws. And if I was the prosecutor, I think I would have tried to prosecute it just to see. I'd make a judge throw that one out. Judge might throw it up, but then the judge becomes the bad person, not the prosecutor. That metal guy, your thoughts on Kiss retiring? Should their last show have been in Detroit? Detroit was always one of Kiss's best markets. They even said so. They wrote songs about it. And I'll admit I was not a gigantic Kiss fan. I admire what they did, but I also liked Back in the New York Groove by Ace more than anything by Kiss. But Mindbend says, yeah, they found it, and the bell is brought up and placed in the museum. And the museum actually does have the Edmund Fitzgerald's bell right as you walk in the front door. There's a bit of a controversy about that because they got the bell off the ship. They replaced it with another bell because that's a whole thing. And then they polished it. And it's all shiny now. And it's like, really? Why didn't you leave it the way it was? It'd been underwater for a little while. It wasn't like covered in barnacles or anything. It was just, an older bell with patina. So Jonas Bob Yorks is speaking of Taco Cat. Edmund Fitzgerald was in fact hauling Taco Night. For those who don't know, iron ore comes from the west end of Lake Superior. Quite often, the Duluth areas, they're loading it on ships. They also load it in Marquette from some places in that area. And then it gets brought down the Great Lakes through the Sioux Locks and down often to Zug Island in Detroit or down towards Ohio. There's places down there. And of course, the whole steel industry down around that curve of the St. Lawrence Seaway. And what they have is these little pellets, taconite pellets. And I've been places. I've been on Zug Island, and the stuff is just everywhere. It's ubiquitous, as they say. Steve Hill, sir, I often listen to your show during my work commute into Orlando on I-4. Your wisdom prevents road rage on my part. Thanks for your efforts. Thank you. I'm doing some good in the world. Mindbends points out that the Arthur Anderson, which was out that night with the Fitzgerald, is still sailing. And there's a whole story there. I'm not going to get too heavily into it. But the Edmund Fitzgerald sailed and the Arthur Anderson sailed, and they're both out on the water on their last trip of the season, basically. And the Edmund Fitzgerald lost its radar. Its radar stopped functioning. And this is back in the mid-1970s, so they don't have a lot of the other stuff they might have today. And so they contacted the Arthur Anderson and said, hey, guys, we lost our radar. Can you help guide us? And they said, absolutely. So these two boats are communicating back and forth. And they're taking the northern route up and around through Lake Superior as opposed to the lower route, which would be closer to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And somewhere along that way, the Arthur Anderson lost the Edmund Fitzgerald. It disappeared from the radar. It vanished that quickly. And so the Arthur Anderson made it into port, but they realized that the Fitzgerald had gone down, and they turned around and went back out, and they didn't succeed in saving anybody because the ship sank that fast. But in conditions that were sinking those ships, the Arthur Anderson had made it safely into the haven of port, and instead goes, no, we will go back out and help look. And it was a couple days later that with helicopters, they spotted some debris and then very quickly did the rest to figure out where the ship went down. But the Arthur Anderson, the captain off that, and the men on board and that ship itself need to be remembered for doing that because they put their own lives at risk to try to do that. So Neuropilots' aircraft get fatigue cracks, high cycle fatigue, but the engineers can calculate the break point mathematically somewhat accurately. Yeah, I've heard some stories. There was that airplane that was taking off in Florida that was flying out. It just got out over the ocean and a wing just broke off of it. And the NTSB comes in to do some investigation. And they're like, why did this wing break? Why would a wing just break off a plane? And they discovered in the maintenance logs that there'd been a crack forming. And somebody just kept patching this crack, and the crack kept going. And you can't just patch a crack like that, apparently, because otherwise the wing might fall off. So, oh, it's crazy. John Z. Fradley, have you been to Cedar Point? Me? Yes. Although I'll admit I went to Boblo more than I went to Cedar Point as a kid. The rich kids went to Cedar Point. We went to Boblo. Oh boy. Oh, Stuff Writer Chalks Airline. Benjamin Lewis mowing the grass in Northwest Arkansas, just checking to say hello. Happy Father's Day, everyone. Thank you for checking in. I picture you out on the sunny lawn, holding a phone, typing this message, wondering if I'll see it. And I did. So thank you very much. Fleetwood's is a whole recording of the radio communication from Arthur and the Coast Guard that night. I list it every year around the anniversary. I have a very good friend named Mitch Lake. And he was on the air in the Houghton Hancock area for decades. He retired recently as the morning man at WMPL in Houghton. And he was on the air when the Fitzgerald went down. And he was frantically trying to get a hold of people to get more news on it. And the thing that struck him that he was telling me about was not just that this ship sank, but the weather conditions. And he talked to a guy at a radio station, I think it was, in Sault Ste. Marie, who was describing the storm that they were hit by. That was also the same storm that the Fitzgerald was trying to get through. And the guy's like, you don't understand. We've never seen it this bad before. It was off the charts, that storm was. So Mark Miller says they may have split up or they may have capsized. Yeah, well, the ship was found in two pieces. And the question is whether it broke up on the surface and went down, or whether it sank and broke going down or hitting the bottom. I personally think, and this is my personal opinion, feel free to, don't call me a liar. Don't think I'm, my personal opinion is that because it didn't have radar and was in those rough waters, I think it went through a shallow part of the lake, because there was a shallow part they went through. And I think they may have bounced off the bottom. And if they bumped the bottom of the boat just right, that could have damaged the bottom in such a way that more pounding on it like that caused it to break and go under. That's my theory. But I've also read books written more recently who the authors have addressed and said, no, it doesn't look like there's any impact marks on what was the bottom of the boat then. But I don't know. And of all the stories I've heard and all of the things I've seen, I do know that it went through a very shallow spot. It did. It went through a spot where it could have hit the bottom. The question is whether that could have caused that catastrophe to happen in that way. I don't know. But as somebody's read 4 or 5 books on it and seen several documentaries, that's the one that keeps coming back to me as the most likely in my mind. So Mark Miller was quoting Gordon Lightfoot, of course. Well, Gordon Lightfoot, a lot of what he wrote was based on things that people were discussing at the time. He obviously took some poetic license with it, meaning that he added some things that we don't know about, like what the cook said to the crew and that kind of thing. But Gordon Lightfoot's song obviously did a great job of making sure that story will never be forgotten. And I tell people that I write books, history books. And I've had people go, what does a historian do? And I say, my primary job is to keep people from forgetting things. We want to remember important things. And so by doing what she did, when Gordon Lightfoot's writing about what the boat did, and the whole story of the boat, he's making sure, because the song was a big hit, that it won't be forgotten anytime soon. And he's a big part of that. Dale Burridge said, I agree, she bottomed out. Donald Westerdale, I grew up at the Detroit Dragway. Ever get to a race there? No, I've never been to a drag strip for racing. Never have. It's one of those things. I got a brother who used to go all the time, just never made it down there. And there's a bunch of drag strips in Michigan. Don't forget Milan. Don't forget Ubly. Ubly Dragway. Oh, CNC Bill 44266. Is that a machine, CNC Bill? I love your stories. Thank you. Mark Miller, I tear up every time I hear that song. Ian the Ghost Rider Jeeping Trucker, any thoughts on New Jersey not having any official Jeep trails? Really? You'd think they'd get a state park or a county park dedicated to that. Michigan's got a couple places. One's up near Mount Holly, and another is someplace up in Genesee County where there are places where they say, look, we've just designated this area, four-wheelers and Jeeps, go knock yourself out. We don't care. Oh. EK says Gordon Lightfoot himself might be forgotten. Yeah, but if he's forgotten, he'll be forgotten before that song. Cold Lake Alta says Gordon Lightfoot gave all the royalties in that song to the survivors' children. Did he really? That'd be impressive. That'd be impressive. Storm Raven, I love that you take such a proprietary interest in history. I'm a history geek too. Yeah, it's kind of funny. I try not to take it personally, but I occasionally do. And I've had people say that's not appropriate for a historian, but people write historical fiction about things I've written about and they make up stuff and it's kind of bothersome. John Michael Karma, Sunday at Detroit Dragway. It's like big time wrestling announcers. That was a star for all those ads. I remember those. Ron Wade, for you, I play a song I perform at weddings and funerals. Sorry, boys, the money's all gone. Scott Summers, MIS. Do they have a drag strip? I don't think so. I don't remember everybody talking about MIS having a dragway. They might, but I don't think so. Joe Daniels asks about a video driving the Cobra. I apologize. I keep meaning to do that. I just haven't done it yet. I did experiment a little bit with my cameras the other day, and I got some really bad footage. So I have some more. The experiments will continue. Did you ever read the book 1776 by Janice Ellery asks? No, I have not. G. Keyman says the pits are located just east of the Genesee County Fairgrounds on the north side of the road. That's the one I was thinking of. I forgot. You had a nickname like that. 49453 says Silver Lake sand dunes allow Jeeps, etc. Yes, there's portions of sand dunes that are allowed to have Jeeps and so on them also. It's a little different than a Jeep trail, I was thinking. But yes, so you can also go, dune running in your Jeep over there. Matthew Shostrom says, I just thought of this. I haven't heard mention of a monster truck in the last decade. My brother went and saw Bigfoot someplace, and he said, no, I'm saying he went and saw Gravedigger. He went and saw Gravedigger, and he said Gravedigger, the vehicle, was treated like a rock star. But that was a couple years ago. Yeah, I've never seen the monster trucks live either. I've seen them. No, I'm sorry, I have. I saw a lesser version of the monster trucks at a small arena. None of them were names. They were not names. And it was at the old IMA arena in Flint years ago. And there was a monster truck. And keep in mind, the IMA arena that they're doing this in is the size of an ice rink. It's a hockey rink. And they're doing monster trucks in there. And this monster truck goes off the ramp, comes down, turns sideways, and runs over the scorer's table. There's guys jumping out of the way, and right over the scorer's table, couple laptops, coffee flying everywhere. 858 Bill says, Steve, there's a driver that won a Le Mans twice called JJ Lehto, real name Yerky Yarva Lehto. Doesn't surprise me. I know about JJ Lehto. People ask me all the time. No relation as far as I know. But also he's got the umlauts over the A. So that metal guy, Steve, status on Jay Leno's turban car. They're getting closer. They're hoping for this summer. That's all I can say. Oh. Code Meister Beats. Oh, I went to Monster Jam years ago. I think it was indoors in the Greensboro Coliseum in North Carolina. Perfectly cool thing to take a kid to. My brother told me he took his kids and they had a blast at that a while back. So 0431 USMC. Did you see the judge who overturned a murder verdict after the woman was in prison for 40 years in Missouri? I saw the headlines. I've not read the story yet. I might do a story on that. That's one of those things where you look at it and you go, okay, I'm glad they fixed this. It's horrible. It took them 43 years, I think, to fix it though. And you always wonder, like, was the prosecution bad? Was the defense bad? How do these things happen? And when you understand how much of these things hinge on eyewitness testimony, and then you discover there's things like jailhouse snitches, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, those aren't reliable. Big Red saw many great concerts at Cobo Hall back in the 70s. Is it still there? Yes, it is. The Joe Louis Arena is not. But Cobo is. It's been renamed the Huntington Bank Event Center or something. This is Cobo Hall. I saw the Autorama there earlier this year. I saw Ted Nugent play there years ago. I saw 2 Van Halen concerts there, including one I was backstage at. And Cobo Hall, of course, is where the runners pick up their bib number and their running shirts and a bunch of their stuff before the Free Press Marathon. But Cobo Hall is still there, absolutely. Ian the Ghost Rider. Hey, Steve, I'd like to call out to today's live. Longtime viewer and subscriber. I love it. Thank you. You're welcome. The Hamlin family is checking. Happy Father's Day, Steve, from the Hamlin family. Deming says that. Neuropilot says, would it be quicker to build a new turbine car with a new engine and a new chassis? You could do that, but Jay's already got one of those too. Jay's got a turbine car built around, I believe, a Honeywell turbine engine that he had custom built to put this jet engine into. And but Jay's turbine car had a 4th generation Chrysler engine in it, and they wanted to rebuild that one. I mean, they could have pried it out and dropped in a slant 6. Okay. So Cody Prine bringing back the turbine car single-handedly. Hey, it's got nothing to do with me. It's my brother. My brother and the crew at the company he works with, Williams International, are doing this. And if you don't know the story, go to YouTube, type in turbine car Haggerty, and you'll find a documentary that we did about the turbine car. There's a big chunk in there about my brother, Jay Leno, his turbine car, what they're doing. They even show parts of the car taken out. It's fascinating, and it's a fun documentary too. I highly recommend it. I'm in it. Thomas Haling, I watch all your videos. I watch your videos. I watch your videos all I can. Have a happy Father's Day. I was trying to imagine the punctuation there. Mark Miller, heck, all it takes is money, right? Yes, but you don't want to spend $1 trillion fixing it. In fact, $1 billion might be too much too. Now, the tricky part is these things were made by humans. That's what Jay always says. Jay always goes, look, people made these. So nowadays, we know more than they knew back then. It shouldn't be any harder to make it today than it was back then. And so the tricky part here was getting the people with the know-how. And so my brother works at a company that makes jet engines. So they've got all the know-how. But this turbine engine in the car, the Chrysler turbine car, has got some unusual characteristics to it that are now considered outdated. And so they had to find some of the old school guys, and they found 3 or 4 of them to come in and help them. And some of the stuff that they've had to figure out, my brother has explained it to me. I understand it, but it's mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing. And so when they get this thing running, it'll be a huge accomplishment. And Jay likes that car a lot. So I'm sure he'll be featuring it quite a bit. Ron Wade, CQ, KD7CKT calling AE7AD. Happy Father's Day. Dad 73 is from Flagstaff, Arizona, where the hams aren't all at picnics. Hammond Egger points out Ford Motor Company was incorporated on this date in 1903. I did not know that. Scott Bloomfield says, my favorite video you made was when Air Canada tried to argue that its chat bot was a separate legal entity. You understand, if a court had said yes, then AIs would have achieved, what do you call that, where you are a legal entity? So do they get basic human rights? Have you seen the Hulu documentary, Hugo's Travels asks, called The Housewife and the Hustler? about Tom Girardi. No, I have not seen that. I've seen the American Greed documentary about it. And Tom Girardi is a real piece of work. And I'm being nice by calling him that. And I'm not sure how innocent his housewife was, because this guy is just showering her with gifts. She's only with him because she's a gold digger. And she doesn't understand that he doesn't make millions of dollars a day to be buying like $90,000 earrings on a whim. Alex A., what happened that it stopped running? Jay was driving his car along one day and the temperature gauge went up unnaturally high. He shut it down, took it back to his shop. They played with it a little bit and realized it was running hot. And it shouldn't be running hot, but it does not have a traditional cooling system. And so they opened it up and found out that there are inside the engine fan discs, fan blades, in essence, on an axle. And there's two in the front and there's one in the back that goes to the transmission through a gearing system. And they discovered that some of the tips of the fan blades had come off, had separated, and gone out the exhaust through the regenerator and torn up the regenerator on both sides. There's two regenerators. And so the regenerators are the things they don't use anymore. So they've got to reconstruct regenerators. It's explained in the documentary. But the condition that normally causes that situation to happen, it's not overheating in that sense. They call it over-temping. The blades got too hot. But what caused them to get too hot, we don't know. And we might never know. But they think they can fix it, and they think they can make some of the things better than they were before, so they'll wind up working out quite well. That metal guy, have you heard about the John Bon Jovi autograph scandal? No, I have not, so I have no thoughts on it. I'd be very careful about spending money on an autograph that I did not see signed myself. And people walk into Antiques Roadshow and Pawn Stars, and they say, I've got this thing. It's, hey, it's an autographed book. This book here is autographed by Leon Boardway. Okay, I got it. See, it's autographed by Leon Boardway of Nome, Alaska. And they go, okay, did you see him sign it? No. Well, do you know anybody who saw him sign it? No. Do you have a certificate of authenticity? No. So the question is that legit? Now, I believe this is, because my friend said he got it from him. But the point is, someone walks into a sports memorabilia show and they've got a baseball and they go, this is autographed by Joe DiMaggio. Says who? So I'm not a big collector of those things. Randall Munson, better, stronger, faster. Where have I heard that before? We can rebuild him. We have the technology. The $6 million man. And whenever he did something super, he went in slow motion. Like somehow that indicates that he's going faster or farther or stronger. He's in slow motion now, though. What's going on? Oh, the metal guy says John Bon Jovi may have been using an auto pen, a machine that signs autographs. I can understand why. I've signed a lot of books in my life, but Mark Miller, I've had and lost Wayne Gretzky's autograph twice. Guess I'm not a good collector. I had Billy Sims' autograph. I met him at the gas station. He signed an autograph for me. I had it pinned to my bulletin board for years and I lost it. I have no idea where it is. JR says, I have a book autographed by Steve Lehto. I think it's a real autograph. What's it worth? $15? Here's the deal. Send it to me for $30. I'll authenticate the signature. Code Meister Beats. My guess would be lean fuel mixture. It does not have a carburetor in that sense. It has a combustor up at the front, and I don't think there's anything that has to do with lean mixture in that sense. There is a situation that you could kind of imagine as a sort of flooding if you got fuel in the wrong parts of the engine and the fuel caught fire, but that would be fairly unusual also, I think. Robert Peralta says, happy Father's Day. Thanks for doing a great job. I know you mentioned you went to law school in California. How come you didn't practice there as you can make more money as a lawyer? I'm not sure if that's true. There's more competition and the cost of living is higher. I've got friends I went to law school with who are out there and doing quite well for themselves. But I've always loved Michigan. I've lived in Michigan almost my entire life. Most of my friends here, most of my relatives are here. I like the environment. I like the places. I like the restaurants. And don't get me wrong, I love Julio's Bucket in California. My understanding is that Julio's gone, but the place is still there. Oh, MHOH says I took an autographed Lemon Law book by Steve to a collector. And he said, so? He should have said who? Alex A. Air Show on here now. I'm listening to a CF-18. Neuropilot says it's usually the turbine engine runs too rich for the airflow without accelerating to provide more airflow. And I guess that'd be me saying is unburned fuel getting to back? Because this happened towards further back in the process, but it's a while since I've talked about it. Bob Blah Blah points out if you can't read Steve's signature, it's real. Yeah, my signature's gotten worse over the years too. I apologize. Bubba Cleveland says, in high school, my girlfriend stole my Ken Griffey Jr. card from Bowman and gave it to her next boyfriend. There's a special place in hell. Okay. I got an email this past week from somebody whom English is not their first language. But it says, Dear Mr. Steve Lehto, we have been notified that you have died and have been asked to send your money to your next of kin beneficiary. Is this true? And I wrote back and said, yes, I died. I'm in a very dark, hot place, and some guy's poking me. Can you help me, please? They didn't respond. So Ian the Ghost Rider points out that he has a 1990 4.2 liter Jeep Wrangler with 160K on the clock. It's called the Ghost, hence my nickname of Ghost Rider. I had a early 90s Jeep also. I had the one with the square headlights. Sorry, I bought it brand new. That's the year they switched. I had it for a couple years and then got rid of it. Alien EV, hi from McCall, Idaho. Eric Skog says, I miss the autumn and the seasons in the forests in Michigan, especially compared to the never-ending Texas summer. Yeah, I've been to California, lived there for a couple years. I've been to Texas, been to Florida. And I understand that, nice weather and all that. Arizona, yeah, of course. But it's true, that you have seasons. And I don't mind seasons. I know people go, well, hey, you get snow. Guess what people in Florida get? Hurricanes. I'd rather shovel snow than go look for my stuff after a hurricane came through. So Matthew Shostrom says sometimes better to make 40 to 50K a year, especially when the average cost of living is 30K in an area where you'd get 80K as an average cost of living of 75K. And that's the whole thing. I've had these conversations with my friends who live in California, and we compare things we've bought. And they tell me what they paid for something. I'm like, oh, well, here's what I paid for mine. And they're like, yeah, but you're in Michigan. And I'm like, yeah, but I got twice as much. So Cody Prine says, yeah, the Lehto turbine car improvement is just an afterburner. Yeah, and that's actually, I assume that when engines have afterburners built into them, they must have stuff back there that's designed to take those temperatures. Keep in mind that the Chrysler turbine car engine was built to be affordably built, and so the parts in it use some exotic metals, but not. They tried to get away from that to get the cost down. So. Neuropilot says a turbine after the combustion stage, the blades rub if it gets too hot. Well, that, of course, depends on the clearance you have in there. And I've actually had a tour of Williams International, the place that my brother works at. And you walk in the front door to security, and they've got a jet engine on a stand. You can walk up to it and look at, like this close to it, this huge jet engine. And I was standing looking at one the other day, and I'm like, look at the clearance of those blades, and it's like it's insane how that, and of course if you had more clearance, then you get stuff bypassing. I understand why it's that way, but the idea of making stuff with such small tolerances, uh, narrow tolerances, and then understanding that, how fast this thing is spinning, for instance, and how much force one of those blades creates if it breaks loose and goes through the ceiling or something. Scott S says, I'm in and out. The action, not the burger joint. Happy automotive Papa Day. I hope the Viper got you something purdy for taking such good care of it. Thank you. Matthew Shostam says, what always gets me is the fact I live right on a state border, and just a 5-minute drive can have such a drastic change in prices. Yeah, I know people live near the border who drive across the border to buy gas because the gas tax in the other states lower, that kind of thing. G Keyman 565 says jet engine plus goose equals disaster. Yeah, just ask Sullenberger. But I can tell you right now that they test engines and they fire things into them to see how good they withstand that. And so, you think that the FAA is rough on certifying engines. You should see what they make them go through to prove that they can not just run for so many hours without maintenance, but that they can also withstand certain kinds of things that airplanes encounter. Neuropilot says the afterburner actually has its own additional fuel sprayed in later. Okay, that makes sense. Because you wouldn't want the unburned stuff going through unless it added some kind of centrifugal force or something like that. JR says the winter up here in Minnesota and Michigan might sting your face, but a Florida hurricane will relocate your whole house. I think I'll stay up here. Code Meester Beats says, was it you that did the story about people throwing coins into jet engines? Yes, that was something that was reported in the news is coming out of, I think, China. For good luck, people would throw coins into the engines before they flew. And they had to post warnings saying, please stop doing that. Because the coins don't go through smoothly. Reinhard Man says, you'd think the thermal expansion would close the gap if that's small. Yes, and they've calculated it out. And I might be exaggerating when I go, it's like this. It seemed like that, but it may have been like this, But I'm sure they've got it calculated to both the heat and whether the centrifugal force of it does anything. But Rand Thompson, happy Father's Day to all. Overkill Pinball, is this your office chair? Yes, the one I'm sitting in right now is the office chair from Flexi Spot. I did a spot for them a few months ago, and then I did a spot for their recliner more recently. And I have replaced the official chair on the set with a wooden chair. It's less comfortable than the white plastic chair, but people complain about it less. So there you go. Matthew Shosman says it was, in fact, China, and it is still happening. It doesn't surprise me. Oh. Scott S. says, is this a joke stream? Are we talking about the turkey in the engine legend? British testing their jet engines for bird strike in the engine used the test of a turkey. I have no idea what you're talking about, but the stream is not a joke. I've also never heard any legend about the British testing anything with turkeys and engines. So, Mark Miller, is the chair still squeaky? Sort of. It creaks in a different way, though. AJS, should a judge be allowed to overrule a prenup? Well, a prenup is a contract. And in many states, they are perfectly fine as long as both sides go into them with their eyes wide open, as they say. Some states don't recognize them as much as other states. I'm not going to get into that. But in a state that recognizes it, they're simply going to look at it under contract law. And once in a while, a judge will look at a contract and go, this contract's not fair for whatever reason. And it depends. So, let's suppose that you were the man and a woman signed a prenup. And then after you got divorced or you're getting a divorce, somebody discovers that you hid something huge from her that either would affect her desire to stay married to you, or some monstrous liability, or some monstrous asset. You know, and the judge might say, well, she signed that prenup without knowing these important facts that you withheld from her. I'm just making stuff up here, but there are situations where a judge can void a contract or alter it to make it fair. But I have to see more specific facts on a particular instance of it. I had a friend who told me, Steve, prenups aren't enforceable. And I'm like, what are you talking about? So Silver Mountain is God is my witness. I thought they could fly. Turkeys, of course. We mentioned that actually at the top of the hour. Somebody else did. WKRP, the infamous turkey drop. Janice Ellery, why is everyone so obsessed with your chairs? I don't know if you knew the answer to that. I have no idea. Neuropilot says they would use a chicken or turkey but wouldn't thaw it first, supposedly. Okay, I'd never heard that, but Michael Watchreed says you should go pet the chair. I can almost reach it from here, can't I? At least it looks like I can, right? CyberDoc, do wooden chairs make for shorter stream lengths? No. Well, no. I don't stream from that chair, first of all, but videos, no, they're not that. It's not that uncomfortable. If it was, I wouldn't sit on it. Overkill Pinball says you're still young if there's no chair cushion. That's possibly true. It's how I keep young. Scott S says I used to work for FMC, Ford Motor Company, or something else. Not quite sure. Part of the chat's gotten away from me. Oh, Keith Donaldson and I worked with a guy that built systems to launch turkeys into jet engines. The company was FMC. Okay, I've not heard of them. Food Machinery Corporation. Okay. And also military equipment. Food machinery. Thank you. Matthew Showstrom, friendly reminder for everyone to hit the like button and sit up straight. Yeah, by the way, the number of people in the room today is small. I'm not sure we hit 500 or not. We're at 476 right now. But usually we get closer to 900, but it's Father's Day. I understand that. Somebody asked about playing video games. And, I've mentioned before, and I lived in Bad Axe. At the end of my street was an arcade, and I got to know the owner and the owner's son really well. And I used to go in there before my shift, and I'd play Defender, Williams Defender. And I got so good at it, I could take a quarter and play until I got bored. Millions and millions of points. And I had all 10 high scores on the screen. And I would go in there, bring a bottle of Coke, and I'd pull up a stool, and I'd just sit there and tie up that game for the whole afternoon. And they didn't care at the arcade because they weren't busy during the day. And then people would come and watch. And I've been toying with the idea about buying a Defender and putting it right there. But the problem is you can't pause it, I don't think. And if I could get someone to set it up so you could pause it, then it'd be great. Because the problem is you're playing a game like that, like the phone rings or something, or somebody knocks at your front door. Am I going to walk away from my game? I had 2.3 million points. Oh, boy. I never played Grand Theft Auto. I have no thoughts on it whatsoever. Although several people told me that Grand Theft Auto had either a Viper or a Cobra or both in it. So I was speculating about why so many young people know what a Cobra is. And somebody said it's in Grand Theft Auto. Overkill Pinball says you can pause the game if you're using an emulator. But the question is an emulator perfect? I want one that has the same screen and the exact same programming. And if somebody said, Steve, I've got one of those machines right now, and it's literally the same programming, same screen, same everything, and it's got a pause button on it, I'd buy it and I'd put it right there. I'd have it in here tomorrow. But I've poked around a little bit. I've never actually asked a dealer about it, but I've never seen anybody mention it before. And I'm not sure if the emulators are quite the same. So Cyberdox is asteroids. You could pop the white plastic from a soda bottle cap and jam it in the hyperspace button to use a bath. Would that really pause it? Because I also played asteroids quite a bit. I never got that good at it. I knew guys who could play that also, and all you do is you get the screen cleared down to one little rock, and then you start flying really, really fast and blasting the valuable flying saucers. JR says, if I get that Defender game, my videos will decrease. Probably. Cold Lake Alta remembers the pinball parlors. Pinball games were cool, too. It depends on which ones they were. I played some that were fun. I played some that were not so fun. I remember when they went from 5 balls to 3. And I'm like, oh my, like inflation is destroying pinball. So somebody said, watch your stream Defender. I would do that too. Because it wouldn't take much to get back to the muscle memory. The key was to fly really, really fast and learn how to fire constantly. Oh, Cyberdoc says it didn't pause, but it kept hyperspacing. So you'd only lose 2 or 3 ships. I always wondered, because I don't like the hyperspace, because both in asteroids and in Defender, hyperspacing occasionally just blow you up. I remember years ago, I wish I knew who this kid was. I remember years ago, there was a bowling alley near my house between Woodward and Adams Road. And they had video games there. And wouldn't go bowling. I'd literally go and just play video games. And there was a guy there, I'd see him once or twice, who would play Missile Command. And this guy was so good that he could run up the score and just play all day the way I was talking about. And he knew exactly where to put the first spread, the second spread, and then how to shoot down the last ones. Next screen, first spread, second spread, shoot down. And he was just very calmly, and that's the one where you have the 3 finger buttons and the roller ball. And the guy just gotten that good at it. And I mean, I played that one a lot too, and I never quite mastered the big heavy roller ball. I had a Game Boy that had Missile Command on it, and again, got decent at it, but not quite. S. Gutog, or Steve Gutog, says 3-ball versus 5-ball goes back a long way with pinball. It's selectable by the operator. But I remember there was an active movement in the mid 1970s where all the parlors went from 5 to 3. I mean, it was all of them. It was just boom, like that was it. And it was such an obvious thing. Like, why not go from 5 to 4? Or why not on slow days go back to 5? So Atari Tempest was a nasty game to play. I played Tempest about a year ago up in Traverse City at an arcade. That was a freaky one. Mindbend Pinball Wizard. Blunted Vegas 702. Do lawyers swear an oath to do no harm like a doctor? No, and quite frankly, I've always found that an odd part of the oath. First, do no harm. Was I planning on doing harm? But lawyers do swear an oath that they will, do what they can for their clients while honoring the law, the Constitution, both the U.S. and the state. And the lawyer's oath is online. And I've had people tell me that the lawyer's oath is top secret and taken in behind closed doors with secret handshakes and stuff and Freemasonry and blood. And it's no. Look, Google Michigan lawyer oath. You'll find it. Alien EV says they still have arcades. Yeah, but something, they're not quite the same. Blitterbug Defender was my jam. I sucked, but it was so cool. Now, if you got good at it, like I said, you could play it all day. And there was something, it was just complex enough to where it wasn't boring to play it all day. But, every now and then you find yourself in trouble. There's one guy left and you're going to lose the planet. And then it recharges and you get all 10 of them back. And on the one screen where you catch all 10 of them and bring them down really, really low to the ground and park them down there and you're blasting all the invaders. Mind bend says I like Defender, but I also played Joust. Joust was a fun one too. They had that in the main lobby area of there's like a central building at Oakland University where they had like a cafeteria and some meeting rooms and some just lounge areas, and they had Joust there. And I remember seeing it there. And Joust was also Williams, which was the people who made Defender. And they learned a lesson because with Defender, people could get good enough to where they just never end playing. And so Joust was designed to where it was just a little bit harder. And I never saw anybody who could play Joust endlessly. And I think the people at Williams said, we can't do the thing where people can learn to play it forever. So on the other hand, they could speed the game up. So my understanding is that Defender had a speed from 1 to 100, and most arcades set it at 10. And 10 was playable, and you would learn that you could actually survive. I went to a couple arcades, put in a quarter, and the game was so fast, I'm like, this has been sped up. And I talked to the guy who owned the arcade, and he goes, anything above like 15 or 20 becomes unplayable. It's crazy. But 10 was where you could do it. Glitterbug remembers Joust. Nigel Carruthers says the sound of the blaster on your ship and Defender was awesome. And also the graphic for when you lost your ship and exploded was so cool. Also, when you died in Missile Command and the screen just goes, the end. Dirk Ramenswinkel, did you and your dad ever compete at video games? No, I don't think my dad ever played a video game in his life. He and I bonded more over talking about cars and the law, but he was not a video game player. I never had video games in the house because I grew up before video games were in the house. I right perfectly. So the arcade games I played were in arcades, and then a little while later they had these things that simulated the games at home, but the first version of it that was played on a TV screen with Defender was horrible. It was like a block ship, the graphics were like beyond jokish, Grubby old patriot, you see the American Pickers episode where they're in the Upper Peninsula back roads and ran into a Finn. I've seen a couple where they've been in Michigan. I'm trying to remember about the Upper Peninsula. I think so. But there's so many episodes of that I'm not quite sure how that, which episode that might have been. Jay, for $2, says $20. Okay. James Walker says, I remember when I was 14, the first game came out. We were happy to get Pong. Okay, I forgot about Pong. A friend of mine had Pong, and you played it on your TV back then, and you connect it up and just beep, 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 just, and you could do that for a while. It was a lot of fun. It was so simple that it was brilliant. And I've read the stories and I've seen the documentaries, Nolan Bushnell, all that, and it is amazing, utterly amazing. The idea behind it. And there's a couple earlier ones like Space Wars, I think it was called Space Wars. Early video games. And then they quickly realized, there's money in this. And it became a gigantic industry. But yeah, Pong, spending hours on a sunny day in the summertime in the basement playing Pong. Thomas Haling, Centipede is the other one. I played Centipede about a year ago. Centipede is one that I got pretty good at. I could never play that forever, but I could play it for a while. And the trick to Centipede was that's the one where the thing comes down and every time it hits something, it reverses. So there gets to be a point where it starts doing this really, really quickly. And you got to spot those. And then if there's any mushrooms down in your field, you got to get rid of them too, because it makes it much harder to dodge it when it gets down there. But for those who don't know what I'm talking about, just ignore it. I'll stop in a second. But Centipede, so if I had to say, it would be Defender number 1, Centipede number 2, and then possibly Missile Command would be my third choice for one to actually own. LS says Space Wars was the first one, yeah. And Scott S says Space Invaders, which is a different one. Space Invaders had the men in that pattern, and they just went like this and slowly came down at you. And that game was I remember seeing that game early on. I played it like once or twice, and I'm like, this is just stupid. But then I kept playing, so I'm like, okay, it's not that stupid. MH08 Frogger, and of course, George Costanza, of course, had a thing for Frogger, you recall. Fred Blowers, the best part of gaming when I was a kid was watching my parents, aunts, and uncles playing Donkey Kong while they were all high. I had a relative who on vacation would bring his Donkey Kong console. I forgot what type it was. And he'd hook it up to one of the TVs in this one room, in this one cabin. And if you're in there, and they didn't have cable at that cabin, so there's only like 2 channels they would get. And I remember playing Donkey Kong, and it seemed to me it's basically just memorizing a lot of patterns. Like, oh, you run over here and hit this, and you run over here and hit this, and you jump this, hit this. And I could see what was addictive. I played it a little bit, but I never missed it when I stopped. Blue Freaker, what about Sinistar? I'm not familiar with that one. Aaron Freeman, Apple Truck. Again, doesn't ring a bell. Scott S. Tank. Is Tank that weird one with the 3-dimensional glowing things, and you're looking through a viewport, and you'd fire, and you'd see the missile go and hit something, and all of a sudden the radar would tell you something's behind you, and as you start to turn, you'd get hit? That was a cool one too, but I never got good at it. Cody Prine says you should check out some of the new multi-game cabinets from 1UP. They even now have pinball ones as well. My concern about those is the Defender had a very specific keyboard setup. And so you had the up-down control with the left-right switcher in this one hand. And then over here, you had the thrust and the firing button. And you had to work these things just right. And it's kind of like the shifting pattern on a car. If I change the shifting pattern on a car, it'd take you a while to get used to it. So I could never buy a game cabinet that said, oh, it contains these games, but it has a different setup. No, it has to be that exact setup. Galaga, I remember that one also. That was a strange one. There's like monsters in outer space flying around in patterns, and you shoot them. Oh, Gordon 861, Battle Zone was the tank one. Battle Zone. Thomas Haling also got that. Storm Raven loved Galaga. Cubert, Alan Brown Sr., Cubert drove me nuts. I remember that one. That was a weird one. Hopping around, right? Yeah, Scott S. On the other side of the screen, the mountains, and it's all green. And you move around, and as you're turning around, you get shot in the back. Oh. Easy Rider 71. Did you see an article in Car and Driver that says a study of people with loud exhausts are psychotic? I had somebody send me a note and say the fact that I owned an exotic, that I owned a loud car means that I'm a narcissist. Or it just means that I like that car. I don't know. I didn't read that article, though. No. It's not Mio7 says you wanted the quick hit rush. Star Castle speeds up as you keep winning. But is that the one where there's those rings and you got to shoot holes in the rings? And the key was to shoot a hole over here and then fly across the screen, come over here and shoot a hole here and fly back over here. I remember that one too. It was always funny how you get these weird workarounds where you would figure out how to get the game. You'd find its weakness and use it against it. Ed G, remember Tron and Dragon's Lair? I don't remember Tron. Somehow that happened in an era where I wasn't spending a lot of time at the arcade. Dragon's Lair does not ring a bell. Love Stargate even more. Was that the one that came after Defender? Yeah, Star Castle, Jim Beam. Duncan Hunter, have you seen the movie Pixels? I've not seen that one. I heard mixed things about it. Split Scream says, sorry, Steve, the random person on the internet said it so it must be true. Well, I think they claimed there was some kind of study they did. And they asked people who were mentally ill, what kind of car would you like to have? which is different than diagnosing people who've got cars to see if they're like that. Because it's kind of like if you said to a 3-year-old, what type of car would you like to have? I'd like to have a Corvette. Okay, so a lot of Corvette owners are 3-year-olds. No, they're not. Xevious. Slackback Xevious. I remember that one too. That's the one where you're like flying over a map and the map was coming like this. So you weren't going this way. You were just doing this, but the map was coming like this. And you were like dropping bombs and shooting stuff. Oh boy. Dragon's Lair was like a Dragon Quest, says Thomas Haling. I don't remember that one at all. It's not me 07. How do they know I have a loud exhaust? It depends. Are you mentally ill? If you are, you've got a loud exhaust. Maybe the loud exhaust causes mental illness. Dan Boyd, when I was 3, I thought C2 vets were Jaguars. Jerry C says, Steve, Stargate was an improved and a little more supped up Defender, souped up. The question, of course, is, was it better or was it harder to play? I like Defender because I could play it all day long for a quarter. Easy Rider says the study is out of Canada by a lady. I have a sneaky feeling I can do another study that says lady Canadians don't like loud exhausts. Of course, the Canadian robot lady probably loves loud exhausts, but she's a different case. So, Keith Donaldson says Doom was the only game I made it through as a whole. I remember I knew a guy who had Doom on his computer in an office, and he shared office space with me, and I'd go in and watch him play Doom. And I kind of understood it, like what the attraction was. But on the other hand, I'd also go, like he learned all the cheat codes, for instance. And it's kind of like, I don't know. It just seemed odd. Cold Lake Alta, the first video games were text only. Remember Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? My friend Tom had that. It's like, it is morning. You look in the mirror. You have a toothbrush in your hand. What should you do? If you typed in brush your teeth, something would happen. If you typed in look in the mirror, something else would happen. If you typed turn around to go outside, something else would happen. And it was moderately funny if you knew the story, but I can see why it didn't catch on. Toxic Wiz, good afternoon and happy Father's Day, Steve. Daniel Player, I'm starting to read The White Death about Simo Heha, the Finnish sniper during the Winter War. Fascinating man and fascinating story. I've read the book. I've read a lot about the guy. Simo was a sniper who has probably the highest confirmed number of successful snipes. And he was shooting Russians. And they were invading his country, so I don't blame him. And the amount of time he was in combat was actually fairly short. It was the Winter War. And then he also spent a bunch of it in the hospital because he got shot. And yet his numbers are stellar. And some of the stuff the guy did was amazing. And we've talked about him before on here. But if you get a chance, look him up, Simo, S-I-M-O. And the rest will autofill. And he was a hero. He actually lived until fairly recently. And I read interviews with him later in life, and they were talking to him about it. He's like, well, we had to do what we had to do. We were invaded by Russia, so we had to defend ourselves. And he'd get those questions about, do you feel bad about it? He's like, no, what we had to do. So to give you an example about how serious that guy was, Simo Heha, if the Russians thought they knew where he was, they would call in an airstrike. Entire airstrike for one guy. So Andy Valenzuela, what's your favorite video game you've ever played? I'd go with Defender. My new username 47 says the Canadian robot lady sounds like the female computer voice in the video game Shockwave. I'm not familiar with it, so I don't know. It was kind of funny though, because back when she first started doing just the intro, so many people said, that computer voice is annoying. And I think I even told you that about a month ago, A guy contacted me and goes, Steve, you've got 500,000 subscribers. You should start using a professional voiceover artist like me. He goes, I'm a professional voiceover artist. I can do this for you. And I said, I've already got one. He goes, no. That synthesized voice is not the same as a professional voiceover artist like me. And I go, dude, she's a real person. If you're a real person, then it's the same. Like, huh? He's going, no, that's not a real person. He's arguing with me about it. And I'm like, dude, you're a professional voiceover artist and you don't understand when you're actually hearing a human voice? What's wrong with you? Oh, boy. Jackie KV says, you ever heard of Kubert? Somebody asked that earlier above. Yes. Isaac Asimov, of course, a science fiction writer, iRobot, and so on. Oregon Trail, Old Paint says, can be played online at the Internet Archive along with a bunch of other games. Is that the one that Lisa Simpson plays? And it's like, you've got dysentery. You die. Game over. I could be wrong. Split Scream says, for an April Fool's, you should have her voice the entire episode. I've done that once. I had her voice the entire episode. Then one time I had Caleb Jones sit on camera and I voiced him. Oh. Ever heard of Edo Robert? No. Yeah, get James Earl Jones to do the voiceover. This is CNN. I mean, I can't even get in the correct octave. So we're getting real close to the top of the hour to be 3:00, so we're going to wrap it up pretty soon. I was checking here for Judge Edo. Harvey Wiseman, hey, Steve, how do so many companies, brands get away with violating both Magnus and Moss and the Consumer Protection Act? Largely because they don't get brought to court. And somebody's got to file like a class action lawsuit and say, hey, this warranty description on this box is wrong. And they file a class action lawsuit. And some judge goes, let me get this straight. You're filing a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against a company because the plastic wrap on the box means the person can't read the instructions and the disclaimers in the warranty for something that costs $12 or $25 or $50. No. And so, what often happens is they violate the law until something bad happens, and then somebody gets involved and they get it straightened out. So AKY115 asks, what is your opinion on private equity buying single-family homes, making home ownership almost impossible for most people? That's an interesting question. And of course, that is a policy question that has no right or wrong answer. But I'm familiar with it. Chet, are you talking about Lance Ito, the judge? ITO, Ito, not EDO. I'm sorry, I didn't recognize EDO as ITO. Getting back to private equity, though, a lot of people are unaware of this, that the number of homes in America that were purchased by rental companies, often private equity, especially during the last big crash we had, the percentage has grown to where in a lot of markets, a lot of the homes are owned by private equity companies that aren't selling them, they're renting them. So if you want to rent a home, that's fine. You want to buy a home, there's fewer homes in the market to buy. So in a roundabout way, it makes the housing more scarce and drives the price of housing up for ownership. But of course, it's a risk to the rental company and so on. But that's the real question. And so that is one of the factors driving up the costs of home ownership in America today. I know it's worse in some parts of the country. My understanding is that around Atlanta, there's a lot of homes that have been purchased by these big companies, and they're renting them out. And some of them are quite large. And I've read some articles about it. I've seen some stories on it, and I've read some books on it, believe it or not. And so, it's there. It's not illegal what they're doing. But I think more people need to be aware of it just to understand it, to know that is in fact going on. So Harvey Wiseman says, isn't that a monopoly? Well, they don't control enough of the market yet to make it a pure monopoly. So no. But anyways, I'm gonna wrap it up right now because it's past 3:00. I got 3:01 by my big clock over there. I got a big clock over there. I will talk to you guys a week from today, give or take. We try to do these on Sundays. And until then, behave yourself. Bye-bye.